Mooney P. It's almost impossible to find, especially on CD. Yet another cruel trick played on all the dumbasses who got rid of their turntables. But every other Echo and the Bunnymen album...
Yeah, I have all the other ones.
Oh, you do? Well, how about the Jesus and Mary chant?
Yeah, they always seem...
They always seemed what? They always seemed really great is what they always seemed. They picked up where your precious Echo left off and you're sitting around complaining about no more Echo albums. I can't believe you don't own this fucking record. That's insane. Jesus. You don't have it? That is perverse. Don't tell anybody you don't own fucking Blonde on Blonde. It's gonna be okay.
Hey everybody, so we're back talking about more records. At some point you're gonna come back to this channel and I'm not gonna be talking about records, and then you will think it is a glorious day. What has John got in store for us? And it will be something magical and wonderful. But instead, this is just gonna be another dull, boring video where I talk about records that I picked up. Now, this video, I'm talking about records that I bought because Bill from the Vinylverse was in town, his annual trip down to North Carolina to see family and all that jazz. Then we always get up and have a dig together. Also, our buddy Brad from Orlando, H2 Vinyl. Brad doesn't make videos anymore, really. I can't blame him. I mean, look at the sadness that still exists here. I mean, I should just quit making videos as well, and I'd probably be happier, like Brad is. But anyway, so Brad drove up, which was fantastic. It was Bill's first time meeting Brad. Dave already made a video because Dave came out and met us as well. Obviously, if there are records involved and it's in Charlotte, Dave's probably gonna show up. I've got more records. I'm not taking them out of the shrink again. Sorry. We're just going to go through this as fast as I can. I'm going to sound like I'm out of breath. Started at Noble Records. Now, there was a record there that I put back the last time I was there when Eric came through town. And as it is with most jazz records, it was still there. You know, a month or two later. So anyway, McCoy Tyner's Trident on the Milestone label. Falling absolutely in love with all of Tyner's stuff from Milestone. So I haven't listened to that one before. I haven't even streamed this one before. So we'll see. But, you know, it's Ron Carter, Elvin Jones. It's got to be good, right? Yeah. Now, this next one I was pretty stoked to find because whenever I'm in the country and bluegrass section, I'm always looking for records by this group of players, and they have their first three records are the ones that I really want. And here's the first one, and it's the Bluegrass album with J.D. Crowe, Tony Rice, Doyle Lawson, Todd Phillips, and Bobby Hicks. They would go on to do 4 or 5 more albums, I think, but there were 2 more albums that came right after this that they kind of titled Volume 2 and Volume 3, and they became basically the Bluegrass Album Band. And yeah, just fantastic players. Of course, anything with Tony Rice, but to also get J.D. Crowe and Todd Phillips. Yeah, I mean, outstanding stuff. So then I'm over in the R&B section, and there were some pretty good records over there to be had. I put back a LaBelle record. There was also another Arthur Alexander record. I talked about Arthur Alexander in my last video. There was an Ace comp that was in there, and I decided to put it back. I just didn't want to get too many things at the first store. I did come across these. Now, the only reason why I bought them was because there were all 4 volumes. And it's a collection of the Loma label singles. The comps are called Soul Music Love Affair. Now, the Loma label had a lot of kind of lesser known acts. And it's a label that I have casually read about in the past. Took this as a chance to kind of take a deeper dive in. You can't turn it down when they're all there, and they were all like $15, so pretty good deal there. So the next stop was The Poet's Vault, which I talked about in my last video. And I gotta be honest, I will say, I don't think that The Poet's Vault is a store that will become like a frequent stop for me in town. It's a little bit further out of my way, but it's definitely, I'm glad it's there. And I think it's definitely kind of like a spot that I'll check on, you know, occasionally. We all found some pretty good stuff in there. First thing that I stumbled upon of interest was this Paul Kelly record. This is actually his debut album. Now, I talked about Paul Kelly in that video that hardly anybody watched about lesser known soul, cheap heat, you know, records. Maybe not all lesser known, but some cheap heat soul records. This one costs a little bit more, and I think I even like overpaid for it a touch. It's on a label called Happy Tiger, and so it's a little bit more obscure. And but one that I've always been looking for, and glad to have it. Yeah, Sealing in the Name of the Lord by Paul Kelly. So the last time I was in the Poet's Vault, the trip I talked about in my last video, these two records were in there and I put them back, but they were still there this day when I went back, you know, with Bill and the gang. It's two John Hartford records. Now, this one's Iron Mountain Depot. His next record would be Aeroplane, which is an all-time classic, one of my favorite albums of all time. That is an album that even if you're not into really folk and bluegrass, that I think everybody should at least check out because it's so unique and so just fun and kind of weird and quirky at times. Now, John Hartford in his earlier career was much more of like a straightforward singer-songwriter. I've never really been a fan of any of those earlier records because Aeroplane was my introduction to John Hartford, and it's a very different John Hartford than his earlier stuff. So when you go backwards and you listen to those albums, they're much more produced, overproduced if you love the more simplified, straight ahead, rawer John Hartford. It's like big time production. There's a lot of instrumentation going on. I don't know. I'm going to give it a little bit more of a chance. I've only streamed it before. If I can kind of block out the Hartford that I love, maybe there's something here for me to really get into. Now, this is more of the raw Hartford. And I'd never really even seen this before. Actually, I take that back. I think Ernest had shown this before on his Instagram. His Instagram's Trailer Park Pimp. So I picked it up this time, and it's like a trio record. John Hartford with two guys named Pat Burton and Benny Martin. And I don't really know who these guys are. And I haven't read up on this record anymore before doing this video. But it's called Slumbering on the Cumberland. That's a fantastic album title. And, you know, it's Flying Fish era John Hartford. John Hartford, most of his Flying Fish records are great too. Now, I don't know why I've never had this record. Actually, I've had a CD of this album before. I don't know why I've never had it on vinyl, but this looked like a pretty clean copy aside from some price sticker damage here on the front cover. That's the debut from Cheap Trick. But I've been listening to a lot of kind of like power pop rock again very recently. A lot in the car. I don't know if it's the summer or whatever, but yeah. And so when I saw this, I was like, and it looked like such a clean copy, and it is. I played it, and it's fantastic. I have played this one already. So I was really glad to get this one. Cheap Trick's debut. I know Emma's very happy. Now this one, you can say I didn't really need it all. And I didn't. I didn't need this. I didn't need any of these records, really, if we're being honest. But this one I really didn't need, but I could not turn it down. I kind of never see this in record stores around here for good reason. It's the UK version of Armed Forces. Of course, the US version of Armed Forces has kind of like the splatter paint, you know, Pollock kind of looking cover. And it also includes What's So Funny About Peace, Love, and Understanding, the Nick Lowe cover. But I've always loved this painting, this album cover. I've always thought it was fantastic. It's also just so different from any of other Elvis Costello album covers. So when I saw this, I don't know, I just had to. Then we moved on to Lunchbox Records. I had 2 albums they were waiting on me that were new albums that I just bought online, and they were holding for me. I'll talk about one of those in another video when I talk about new releases in 2024. These were the 2 used records that I found. There were a few more that I could have bought, but I'd already kind of bought a lot of records at the first 2 places, so I was trying to slow down a little bit because we had one more place to go. So now this one has evaded me for a while. It's kind of like a must-own Motown record for me. It's Still Water Runs Deep by the Four Tops. And they had this copy in the used section over at Lunchbox Records. It was only like 10 bucks. I don't know the exact pressing on this, but it looks earlier. And then this was an outstanding find. This was probably one of the better finds of the day. Because it's a UK first press of a record by The Fall. I think it's the one right before this Nation Saving Grace, which I actually have a copy of as well. And I also found that one at Lunchbox. So the next time I go by Lunchbox, I'm just going to ask Scott if he's got some kind of stash of UK presses by The Fall and just let me have the rest of them. Pretty excited to find this, and it was a great price. It was only like 25 bucks. So those were the 2 things I picked up at Lunchbox. From there, we went on to Premium Sound. Love Premium Sound. Luke has a small little kind of setup in the Goldtone Workshop, which is like a guitar repair and store, you know. Luke's got his little setup of Premium Sound in there, and there's just always great stuff in there. I could always go in there and find something, and pretty quickly. So this one I grabbed purely for the ensemble and the label that it's on. And it's Pure Dynamite by Buddy Terry. I believe it came out in 72 or 73. It's on Mainstream Records. That's another thing. I never see original mainstream stuff. Woody Shaw, Eddie Henderson, Kenny Barron, Joanne Brackeen, Stanley Clarke, Billy Hart, Lenny White, Air 2 is on it. It's post-bop, but there's some nice little skronk and screech in there from time to time. It gets kind of rhythmic at times. The one thing that stood out to me on this record that I was not expecting was that the 2 songs that Stanley Clarke plays on, he absolutely slays. Wild. The bass playing is incredible. And you'll see it's a DJ copy, a white label promo for those that care. Yeah, I'm really, really happy with this. Like, you know, and this is the kind of stuff that I find occasionally at Premium Sound. So one of my little projects that I haven't been like too crazily vocal about, but it's just kind of like one of my little side things that I've been after is trying to get more Richard Thompson and also like good, decent copies of some of the Fairport Convention records, Legion Leaf being one. Now this was in there. It's a later press. It's like a 80s press. The record itself looks to be in pretty good condition. There you see the A&M label. And I don't know. I'm just, for the price, you know, it's like around $10. You know, I'm going to grab that. And then the last one is pretty funny because Bob Bradley just recently did a video talking about Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath, talking about the Rhino High Fidelity series, how it compares, and talking about like the first pressings. And he would come away saying that the WB US Green Label is by far the superior sounding one. It's got more bottom end. It sounds the way that Sabbath should, where the Vertigo, I guess he said, sounds like a little bit higher. It might have some more clarity to it, but it lacks that kind of, there's not enough geezer in there, right? There's not enough geezer. I commented on the video. I was like, you know, I have a reissue. I have a really nice Rhino reissue that came out in 2010, and it sounds fantastic. I don't even know why Rhino felt like they needed to do a high fidelity version of it because the one that I have sounds amazing. I said, you know, if I came across one, I don't know if I'd pay $50 for it. It seems to be that that's like what you're going to be lucky if you find one in a record store for $50. Well, look what I found. Black Sabbath, Black Sabbath. Now, it's a 1970 pressing, but it is on the Warner green label. It looks to be VG Plus, visually grading, and it was $30. And Bob said, hey, you might find one for $25 laying around, you never know. Well, sure enough, look at there. It's pretty fucking funny. So, yeah, that was the last find of the day and a pretty exciting one. Stoked. I'll figure out what I'm going to do with that reissue. I'll listen to that one first and make sure, but, you know, for that price, might sell that one. I don't know. We'll see. It was a great day. I mean, it was like a long day of digging for records, hanging out with friends. Really good time. Got to spend a lot more time with Brad this time than the first time he swung through town. I was working that day and I could only get out for like a couple hours. So it was awesome to spend like a full day with Brad. We ended up grabbing dinner later and everything. And yeah, it was an outstanding day. I wish it could happen more often. That'll be it. Hope everybody's doing well. See you on the next one. I'll probably be talking about records. Whew. Like, out of breath, man. Talk to y'all later. All right, bye.
Digital gramophone makes no sense.